The sun was barely rising over the mountains of South Lake Tahoe, California. The air was cold, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible, like smoke escaping your mouth. Pine trees stood like dark shadows, lining the roads. The neighborhood was quiet, almost peaceful, the kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. A few cars passed by, a dog barked in the distance, and somewhere, a radio played softly from inside a kitchen. Inside one of those homes, a 14-year-old girl was getting ready for school. Her name was Jaycee Dugard. She was shy, polite, and quiet, not the type of teenager who got into trouble. Teachers described her as sweet, the kind of kid who stayed out of drama. Jaycee grabbed her backpack and stepped outside, walking toward her bus stop. Her stepfather, Carl Probin, drove her there, just like he had done countless times before. It was a normal routine, a simple drive that should have lasted 2 minutes. But as Jaycee stepped out of the car, a vehicle rolled up nearby, slowing to a stop. Within seconds, Jaycee was grabbed, dragged away, and taken in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, in front of her stepfather, and on a road that seemed too quiet to scream back. In just a few moments, Jaycee Dugard vanished, and the world would spend the next 18 years believing she was dead. But the truth was far more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Jaycee wasn't dead. She was alive, and she was being kept in a place no one would ever suspect, a place so close it would make your stomach turn. Before we dive into this unbelievable true crime story, hit subscribe and like, because this case is one of the darkest, most disturbing survival stories in modern American history. The abduction, the day everything changed. On the 10th of June, 1991, Jaycee was only 14, a freshman, still very much a child. That morning, she wore her backpack, ready for school. Her mother, Terry Dugard, had already left for work. Jaycee lived with her mother and stepfather, and while life wasn't perfect, it was normal, quiet, and safe, or at least, it seemed safe. Carl Probin drove her to the bus stop on Highway 50, near their home. Jaycee stepped out of the car, and then a car appeared. Witnesses later described it as a sudden, violent moment, like something ripped straight out of a nightmare. A man jumped out, and a woman followed, raising a gun. Jaycee froze. Shock stole her voice. The man grabbed her. Carl tried to fight, but he was struck hard. Jaycee was forced into the car, the door slammed, and the vehicle sped away. In less than a minute, she was gone. Her stepfather was left bleeding on the roadside, screaming helplessly as the dust faded into the morning air. It wasn't just an abduction. It was a violent kidnapping carried out with chilling precision, as if the kidnappers had rehearsed it. Panic spreads, a town enters a nightmare. Police arrived quickly. Sirens echoed through the quiet neighborhood as officers taped off the area, and detectives began asking questions while witnesses gave shaky descriptions. This wasn't a runaway. This wasn't a teen wandering off. This was a confirmed kidnapping, and in cases like this, the first 48 hours matter most. Investigators launched a massive search. Helicopters scanned the forests. Search dogs followed scent trails. Volunteers combed through trees and brush, and police checked nearby roads and vehicles. Flyers were printed almost instantly. Jaycee's young, innocent, smiling face appeared on posters across California, on stores, gas stations, schools, and street poles. The community of South Lake Tahoe felt as though it had been hit by an invisible bomb. Parents were terrified. Children were warned not to walk alone, and doors that were never locked before were now bolted shut. If Jaycee could be taken in broad daylight, then no one was safe. As hours turned into days, fear became a sickness spreading through the town. A mother's worst fear, Terry Dugard's desperation. Jaycee's mother, Terry Dugard, was shattered. Imagine being at work, living a normal day, and suddenly receiving the call that your child has been taken, not missing, not lost, but taken. For Terry, life became a nightmare that never ended. She pleaded on television, begged the kidnappers, and spoke directly to Jaycee, hoping her daughter might somehow hear her voice. She didn't sleep or eat properly. Every phone call made her heart stop. Every knock at the door made hope rise and crash again. The scariest part was that there was no ransom call, no demand, no note. Whoever had taken Jaycee didn't want money, they wanted her, and that possibility was almost too horrifying to say out loud. The investigation, hope turns into exhaustion. Detectives worked around the clock. They interviewed known offenders, checked parole lists, followed tips, and even explored theories of organized kidnapping rings. But nothing stuck. No fingerprints, no DNA, no confirmed sightings. The case became a maze of dead ends. Weeks passed, then months, then a year, and still nothing. Jaycee's disappearance began to feel like a ghost story. People whispered theories she was trafficked, she had been killed quickly, she had been taken out of the country, she had been buried in the mountains. As time passed, hope became heavier because every missing child case carries the cruel truth. The longer they're gone, the less likely they are alive. Slowly, the world began to accept a painful conclusion. Jaycee Dugard was probably dead. But what no one knew was that Jaycee was alive, and she was closer than anyone could imagine. The monsters, Philip and Nancy Garrido. The people responsible for the kidnapping were not strangers, not mysterious criminals from far away. They were a married couple, Philip and Nancy Garrido. Philip was a registered sex offender with a criminal history and was known to law enforcement, yet he was walking free. He lived in Antioch, California, about 150 miles from where Jaycee was taken. To the outside world, Philip looked like a strange man, wearing long hair, acting odd, claiming to be religious, and sometimes described as unstable or creepy. But no one knew what he was hiding. Behind his house, he built a prison not underground, not in a cave, but in his own backyard. A backyard prison that would hold Jaycee for nearly 2 decades. Life in captivity, 18 years stolen. Jaycee was taken to Philip Garrido's home, where she was kept in a hidden area behind fences and sheds, a section of the yard designed to block visibility from neighbors. She was isolated, controlled, and watched constantly. Jaycee described being held in a small enclosure, a place that didn't feel like a room but like a cage. Imagine being 14 years old and suddenly having your entire world shrink into a prison with no escape. No school, no friends, no family, no sunlight unless her captor allowed it. Jaycee was not living, she was surviving. Every day was about obeying, every moment about fear, knowing that resistance could lead to punishment or worse. Over time, Philip Garrido didn't just kidnap Jaycee. He erased her identity, controlled her mind, her movements, her entire life. The most shocking truth: 2 children born in captivity. Years passed. During captivity, Jaycee became pregnant not once, but twice. She gave birth to 2 daughters, children who were raised inside the same hidden backyard prison. They didn't go to school, play freely outside, or understand normal life. They were raised under lies, controlled by Philip Garrido, who dictated their worldview. To those girls, the backyard was reality, their entire universe. For Jaycee, the children became her reason to survive. When a victim becomes a mother in captivity, the stakes are even higher. It was no longer just about her survival, it was about protecting her children. Jaycee endured unimaginable psychological trauma but stayed alive because she had to. How did nobody know? The horror of hidden in plain sight. This part terrifies people most. Philip Garrido was not hiding in a jungle or off-grid. He lived in a neighborhood, spoke to people, and interacted with the world. Yet Jaycee remained imprisoned behind his house for 18 years. Some neighbors noticed odd things: high fences, strange structures, children's voices, Philip acting bizarre, but nobody imagined the truth. Authorities failed to monitor him properly, even though he was on parole. The system failed repeatedly, and Jaycee paid the price. The world moves on. Jaycee is declared dead by time. As years passed, Jaycee became a memory to most. Her name faded from the news, posters disappeared, and new cases replaced hers. But her mother never stopped hoping. Terry Dugard continued searching, holding onto her daughter's room, belongings, and pictures the smallest pieces of hope. Hope is exhausting, and after many years, people began to say the cruel words, "She's probably gone." Jaycee's disappearance became one of those tragic cases referenced as unsolved. To the world, she was almost like a ghost, but in reality, Jaycee was still alive, breathing, living, and waiting. The breakthrough. The day Philip Garrido made a mistake. The breakthrough came in August 2009. Philip Garrido, required to meet parole officers, began behaving strangely, more unstable than usual. He appeared at the University of California, Berkeley, with a woman and 2 young girls. At first glance, they seemed like a family, but something felt off. Authorities noticed the girls were quiet, avoiding eye contact, almost as if trained not to speak. Philip acted erratic and spoke about religion in ways that made no sense. His behavior raised suspicion, prompting further investigation. When questioned, he gave inconsistent answers, and his body language screamed deception. When the woman was separated and asked again, she eventually broke down, revealing her true identity, Jaycee Dugard. She had been forced to lie for years, but finally she said words that sent shockwaves across America. "I'm Jaycee Dugard." If you're still watching, make sure to hit like and subscribe, because stories like Jaycee's deserve to be told, remembered, and never repeated. The shocking discovery: a missing girl found alive after 18 years. Police could barely believe it. The case that had haunted California for 18 years was suddenly alive again. Within hours, authorities contacted Jaycee's family and confirmed her identity through fingerprints and DNA. The confirmation felt like a miracle mixed with horror. Jaycee Dugard was alive. She had been held captive for 18 years. The news exploded across the nation. Media outlets rushed to cover the story, and people who had forgotten the case were suddenly pulled back into it. Shock, disbelief, anger, and tears swept the country. This wasn't just a survival story, it was proof of a nightmare hiding in plain sight. Reunion relief doesn't feel like happiness. When Jaycee's mother saw her again, it wasn't a simple movie-style reunion. It was complicated. The girl Terry had lost at 14 had returned as a 29-year-old woman, a woman with trauma, with children, and with a life shaped by unimaginable suffering. Imagine hugging your child after 18 years and realizing you can't get those years back. You can't rewind time or erase the pain. You can only hold what remains. For Jaycee, reuniting with her family was emotional but terrifying. Freedom felt unfamiliar, love overwhelming, and safety strange after nearly 2 decades of captivity. The property search, the backyard prison revealed. When police searched Philip Garrido's home, they uncovered the horrifying truth. Behind the house were hidden tents, makeshift buildings, shed-like compounds, and living areas carefully blocked from view. The entire setup had one purpose: to hide a human being, to hide a stolen life. It wasn't just a kidnapping, it was long-term imprisonment. Police reports described the area as deeply disturbing, designed for secrecy and control. The more investigators looked, the more horrifying the story became. Arrest and outrage. America demands justice. Philip and Nancy Garrido were arrested immediately. As the story unfolded, public outrage surged. People learned that Philip Garrido was already a registered sex offender with previous convictions, yet he had been allowed to live free, to build the backyard prison, and to hold Jaycee for 18 years. The system had failed. Law enforcement had failed. Parole supervision had failed. The public demanded answers and struggled to comprehend how such a tragedy could happen in plain sight. The courtroom, justice, after nearly 2 decades. In court, Philip Garrido pleaded guilty, and Nancy Garrido did the same. The charges were severe: kidnapping, sexual assault, false imprisonment, child abuse, and conspiracy. The sentencing was brutal. Philip Garrido received 431 years to life in prison, while Nancy Garrido received 36 years to life. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Even though justice had been served, nothing could restore what had been stolen. 18 years of Jaycee's childhood, freedom, and normal life were gone, replaced by a life rewritten by violence. The psychological damage. The trauma doesn't end after rescue. Most people think the story ends when a victim is found, but for survivors, the real journey only begins. Jaycee had to rebuild her identity and learn to live normally again, how to trust, how to sleep without fear, and how to walk outside without feeling watched. Psychologists explain that long-term captivity causes deep trauma, including PTSD, dissociation, severe anxiety, emotional numbness, depression, difficulty trusting, and fear of freedom. On top of that, Jaycee had to help her daughters understand their reality. Born in captivity, raised under lies, their entire existence stemmed from a crime. The truth was heavy enough to break anyone. The most haunting question: why didn't anyone hear her? One of the darkest questions in this case is how nobody heard her. Jaycee was not hidden in a jungle. She was behind a suburban home for 18 years. Neighbors lived nearby, people walked past, cars drove by, and life continued. And yet, she remained invisible. That is the horror of captivity. Sometimes victims don't disappear into the darkness, they disappear behind fences, behind normal doors, and behind ordinary streets. Nobody looked closely enough, and the tragedy remained unseen for nearly 2 decades. Jaycee's legacy, a story that changed missing person cases forever. Jaycee Dugard's survival became one of the most famous kidnapping cases in America. Her story reminded the world that missing people can still be alive, that hope should not die, that systems must improve, that parole supervision must be strict, and that community awareness matters. Her case forced authorities to rethink how offenders are monitored. It also became a symbol for survivors everywhere, a testament that even after years of darkness, survival is possible. The scariest truth: this could happen anywhere. The Jaycee Dugard case is terrifying because it doesn't feel like fiction, it feels possible. A child walking to a bus stop, a car pulling up, a split second, a life stolen. And the kidnappers weren't international criminals or secret agents, they were a couple living among society. This case proves something chilling. Sometimes monsters don't hide in the woods. They hide behind smiles, behind normal homes, behind quiet neighborhoods. That truth is what makes this story unforgettable. As we look back at the Jaycee Dugard case, one thing becomes painfully clear. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the middle of an ordinary morning, and steals a life in seconds. Jaycee Dugard survived 18 years of captivity, years stolen from her childhood, her freedom, and her future. Even though she was finally found alive, the damage done to her life can never fully be undone. This case is not just about crime. It's about failure of systems, failure of supervision, and failure of awareness. And yet, it is also about survival, because Jaycee endured what most people couldn't imagine, and she lived. Her story reminds us that missing does not always mean gone, and sometimes the most terrifying prison isn't far away, it's right next door. If this story disturbed, shocked, or stayed with you, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this video. The more we talk about cases like this, the harder it becomes for monsters to hide. And remember, sometimes the real mystery isn't where someone went, it's how they survived when the world stopped searching.